Welcome back to Mining Stock Daily. Ian Wagner here with a corporate update from our friends at Great Pacific Gold. They are a gold and copper explorer with their flagship Wild Dog project in Papua New Guinea. They trade on the TSX Venture with the symbol GPAC and on the OTCQX with the symbol GPGCF. Here with us today is a couple of gentlemen from GPAC. We have our CEO, Mr. Greg McCunn, and also Callum Spink, the Vice President of Exploration. Gentlemen, good to see you. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having us, Ian.
Yeah, absolutely. So we spoke in early May, a lot of drilling on the ground. You guys are exploring your Wild Dog project there in Papua New Guinea, large 15-kilometer corridor, a lot of different targets. You guys have two drills on the ground. Kind of give us maybe a rundown of what you've been doing since we last spoke with you and just kind of how things are progressing there.
Perfect, Ian. Well, I'll give you a high level here first, and then we can maybe get into a little bit more of the details. But in general, what's been happening since we last spoke is we've been focusing on drilling two targets on our 15-kilometer epithermal Wild Dog structural corridor. The first being Kasie Ridge, which is one of the northernmost targets. It's in the north zone of that 15 kilometers. And the second being Kavasuki. And both those rigs have been progressing well. We've finished hole number 1 at Kasie Ridge. We've started hole number 2. That'll be likely the final hole in that program. As you remember, it's an exploratory, sort of never been drilled before. Very interesting to see what we get out of these two holes. And Callum will talk a little bit more to the details on that. And then Kavasuki, historical work there has led us to believe high-grade mineralization. In the first 5 holes, we had some very good intercepts there. We're seeing that broad 30 to 50 meters of structure and mineralization that's been running between 2 and 3 gram per ton gold. So a little more modest at Kavasuki in terms grade-wise than we saw at our Sinovit target from our 2025 drilling, but equally as exciting. This is all, as a reminder, open-pittable material. So this is still very, very good grades and significant intervals of mineralization.
Callum, why don't you talk to us about Kasie Ridge? Because I know when we spoke at PDAC, you guys had just gotten that brand new drill in country and on the ground there, and we're excited to drill that. And I know that's that blue sky potential with that kind of that hard lithocap you guys had to punch through. Just kind of tell us about that first hole, what you found, how you're thinking about it, and maybe what you're looking for in hole 2.
Thanks, Ian. No, I appreciate it. So we've just finished the first hole down to a depth of 593 meters. It was actually 45 meters beyond where I had originally planned on having the total depth. And that's because it still looks exciting, even at 593. So from a geological perspective, and for your listeners out there, what we've basically drilled with the Kasie Ridge hole is a continuous package of alteration, which is very much implies a potential for a porphyry system. We drilled the advanced argillic cap, went into a propylitic altered package of rocks. And then, around 215 meters, we progressed into this upper phyllic sulfide rich zone. So, we were seeing intervals of up to 20% pyrite, very broad scale, silica alteration, massive sort of chalcedonic silica throughout, the entire interval from 200 down to 300. And then we went into, a varying package of rocks down to the end of hole with, breccias and anhydrite and semi-massive pyrite. So all of these indicators suggest that we're on the margin of what is a very big hydrothermal system. So we've been reluctant to obviously come out. The hole's been difficult to drill. And, we've persevered with this hole. It had, it was generating groundwater, but we managed to get it down. And basically the core photos that we've got, we've sent off at least 60 samples for XRD analysis to look at the clay alteration and the specific clay minerals. What we need to understand is when you're looking at core, yes, it's white clay, but what type of white clay is it? Because it has implications for further exploration. But we are going to drill hole 2. In fact, we've started drilling already. We're about 50 meters down that hole, and we're seeing, very strong, similar indicators. We're a couple of 100 meters to the south, but again, very encouraging so far with what we've seen. So everything within our PXRF, we didn't put any specific results out. Obviously, we want to let the assays do the talking. We're not announcing that Kasie Ridge is a discovery, but it's clearly a very exciting system with all of the hallmark indicators that we would like to have seen. And, to have this on your first hole in an area that's a couple of kilometers wide, it's very, very encouraging. So we're looking forward to drilling, as Greg had sort of previously mentioned. We've got to test what these geophysics anomalies are at depth. But with 2 holes, we'll be able to do a lot more vectoring towards the source of this hydrothermal alteration. And, I'm pretty encouraged by what we've seen so far. We're engaging some of the universities and, some world-leading professionals in this space have commented on the call with, that very encouraging sort of remark. So I'm pleased. Greg's pleased. I think, as we release and start talking about Kasie Ridge in more detail in future releases, once we have more results back, I think the market will be pleased as well.
With that second hole, do you expect to sort of, I guess 2 questions, do you expect to go that deep as well? And then do you kind of expect that second hole to kind of go that same way? And just in terms of what you're encountering once you kind of get down there at depth?
No. So look, we've learned a lot, and this is the first hole into this area that's ever been drilled, right? So we didn't really know what to anticipate. In fact, just for the listeners out there, I've swapped the rigs around. So the original rig that we had on site is capable of doing 1,500-meter style holes. If we were to ever go down that route, we don't know what we don't know. So we are testing these geophysics anomalies. And in the second hole, we've put a rough depth of total drill depth of 400 meters. But like hole 1, we were at 300, 400 meters. I'm going, my God, it's so silicified. There's breccias, there's pyrite everywhere. We'd be crazy to can it. And in fact, I'm reluctant that we canned it at 600 meters. But the issue with these types of systems that you could be drilling the limb of it and it could be 2 kilometers deep. And, we're not in a position right now to drill a 2-kilometer hole, but I think we gathered enough information geologically to, at least go and drill hole 2. And so, we're going to drill to 400. If it looks the same, then, we'll have to make a call on the day whether we continue. It might look better and we might be closer to the source of mineralization, or we could hit something in this hole. We just don't know until we drill it. But the first 50 meters looking pretty exciting so far.
Okay. And then just to kind of wrap that up on Kasie Ridge. So essentially drill those 2 holes, come back, look at all that data, see what you got, and then use that to kind of inform the future drilling for 2027. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, people have got to understand these systems. If you compare it to other high sulfidation deposits around the world, they're very large scale. You're never going to find it on your first hole unless it's outcropping. And so, we've got to use our technical in-house capabilities and external capabilities as well, working with some of the, world's leading universities on this style of mineralization. And, using products like shortwave infrared, near-wave infrared technology to look at clay spectra. I'm sending all of the samples to Perth in Western Australia for MS60, so mass spectrometry of all the different elements to look at, all the pathfinder elements to, really give this a mighty good crack. We wouldn't have drilled it if we didn't think it's good. The core shows that it's definitely part of a broad system. Now for us, it's trying to vector in. So using all, you spend all the money on drilling, you might as well spend the extra money on assays and interpretation.
Figure out everything you got there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, yeah. Switching over to Kavasuki. Greg, I think when we spoke in early May, you kind of outlined that you were drilling Kavasuki a little bit more, and the end of that drilling would be, I think, the end of June. So we're kind of coming up on that. You want to talk about kind of what you guys have found there, and maybe how your understanding of that target has grown or changed, or kind of where you're leaving it right now?
Yeah. So just finishing off Kasie Ridge, as you say, we've been moving to Kavasuki, where our other rig has been focusing on drilling Kavasuki since we last spoke. And the concept here, Ian, is that when we finish this second hole at Kasie Ridge, we've just outlined to the market here recently a plan for the balance of 2026, which is really focused on the main zone. So this is this 4.5 or 5 kilometers, 3-mile section in the heart of the Wild Dog Structural Corridor. Basically goes from Kavasuki to the north down to the EK target in the south. And those are all drill-ready targets. We've outlined about a 10,000 meter plan that we expect to be drilling with both rigs turning in that main zone. And this is a little bit less, this is not like Kasie Ridge, which has never been drilled before, and a very, very interesting early stage exploration. This is more brownfield. These are all targets that we have prepared and matured for drilling. They all show high grades in trenches, rock chips, geophysics all line up. This is much more a high probability of success here. So we're expecting over the course of the balance of 2026 with these 2 rigs to see the same kind of success we've had at Sinavit and Kavasuki all along this main zone corridor. And there's a table that we published that shows what meters we expect to drill at each of these. And Kavasuki being obviously the first one, it's still ongoing. I don't think we're going to quite get it finished up by the end of June, but it'll be close. We still have we're on hole number 9 there now. So we have results pending for holes 6, 7, and 8 that haven't been released to the market yet. And what we're expecting to do now is to package the final holes up all together and publish them as a complete set, so that the listeners can understand what they mean, as opposed to just putting out one hole at a time
piecemeal,
as
sure.
they trickle in. Yeah, and I think that'll be a little more valuable for the investors who are looking to see what scale does Kavasuki have and what these drill results mean in general. So the first 5 holes that were drilled here, the first 7 holes that were drilled, were all drilled on an east-west section across an area with known mineralization. You've seen results for the first 5, and again, some very good intervals there. Maybe Callum can just fill you in here, but we have now stepped out about 250 to 300 meters to the north. And maybe Callum, you want to comment just what you're seeing in those drill holes? And then we plan to step out further to the south. So I think it'll be maybe about 4 or 5 weeks more of drilling here, Ian.
Okay.
Callum?
Yeah, so just continuing on, we know that Kavasuki is it's high-grade mineralization at surface. And, for us now is to show scale. Instead of just stepping down 30, 40 meters, we've decided to step out a couple of 100 meters with our planned drilling for the remainder of the program, which is, as Greg mentions, in that news release this morning. So we've got 5 holes remaining. We're currently drilling hole 9, which is beneath hole 8 on section. This is, testing a couple of different theories. In addition, we've planned our drill program around looking at a reinterpretation and remodeling of the historical IP. So, evaluating whether the chargeable anomalies are actually real within that data set, given it was quite a wide-spaced IP program, using what's been done previously to try and inform some of our drilling. But the goal here for Kavasuki, we know it's high grade. People have seen that, nearly 59 meters at 2.5 grams per ton gold, is to go and really step out and see what this thing looks like at depth and along strike. It hasn't been systematically tested. These 5 or 6 remaining holes are really step outs to understand the geology. And, not all of them are going to be good, but we don't know what we don't know. It's never been drilled at these sorts of depths. It hasn't been drilled on these particular sections. The IP hasn't been drilled as well as it probably should have historically. So there's a lot of reasons that we're doing the last remaining 5 holes.
Just to put that in the context of kind of, Greg, what you were talking about kind of with this main core of this, how do you want people, or how are you thinking about Kavasuki as you think about building out towards that resource and sort of getting to that critical mass where people go and say, okay, hey, this is a meaningful resource? Is Kavasuki sort of going to be the core of that, or you think that'll be just one part of it, and it'll be Sinavit, Magmit, Morgan Vein, Magiabi, kind of all those things? Like, how are you kind of, I guess, thinking about its place at the table?
Yeah, so we believe it's just a part of it, and I think this whole 5 kilometers is, we know that the structure persists across that is highly likely it persists across that based on the geophysics. We see it in our drilling at Sinavit and at Kavasuki. Even the areas that aren't carrying grade, we still prove that the structure in the vein is still there, right? So there's definitely more high-grade shoots that occur across this. And so the objective for this year is to basically cover that 4.5, 5 kilometers or 3 miles and identify where all the high-grade shoots are. And so, we found one at Kavasuki, and we're stepping out on either side of it. We'll see if there's more strike length to that. And then we're going to carry on with that. And it would be working towards the end of the year where we'll have that whole 5 kilometers covered. And we'll now understand the structural controls. We'll understand where the high grade shoots are. And then that would be a time to come back with probably an RC rig in 2027 and infill drill this whole thing to resource quality.
Yeah, I think that's a good transition to kind of what this sort of strategic planning that you outlined you guys were going to be doing and that you released some color on, because you have such a long corridor, you have a lot of targets, you're capitalized, right? And you've got drill rigs on the ground. I think just maybe still even bird's eye view, kind of what you want to accomplish the rest of this year and then into 2027, and then maybe connect that to how these other targets fit into that plan.
Yeah, so we did just finish a big picture planning session. So we've got a pretty good view on what we think we're going to do here for the next, call it 18 to 24 months. And it basically could be summarized quickly by saying, we're doing some high risk drilling at Kasie Ridge. Let's see how that works out. That's, high risk, high reward, new discovery type potential. It could have tremendous, that could add to the story of Wild Dog tremendously with a new discovery. In parallel to that, in the bulk of the balance of this year, is going to be drilling the bread and butter, as we call it, the main zone. But while we're drilling that with diamond rigs, so that helps us get obviously gives us the structure and the orientation that we need to understand the structural controls. Will be also a separate crew, as we have 3 crews here. One of the crews will be out doing field work, and we've now moved them to the south zone. So the south zone is a parallel system, or not parallel, it's along strike to the south, but it's a similar scale and size and potential to the main zone. It just has far less exploration work done on it. But the early stage work that we've done there has shown tremendous potential. I mean, we've got some rock chip and trenching samples from the area now, but it's really just, this month of June that we've started working along this. And the balance of the year we're going to be spending on flushing out a whole other pipeline of targets. There's about 8 of them that we know of right now. And as we know from the main zone area, when we actually put boots on the ground and we get out there, we tend to make new discoveries of new vein systems as well. It's just the nature of this district scale land package we have. But yeah, we've had some tremendous results coming out of the south zone, rock chip samples running up to 75 gram per ton gold, follow-up trenching instead the Steel Creek area was 5 meters at 24 gram per ton gold. So these are, very similar type of results that we saw at Sinavin, Kavasuki, and in the main zone. So yeah, the plan is at high level 2026 diamond drilling on the main zone, 2027 diamond drilling on the south zone, and infill drilling with RC on the main zone. And then Kasie remains where the north zone remains a bit of a wild card. So we'll wait to see how the second drill hole plays out before we decide where that slots in the program.
Sure, makes sense. I guess my last one really for you, Callum. I mean, as you kind of look at some of those other targets and you put together this plan of how you're going to drill this and attack this thing, kind of what gets you excited, whether or not it's something at Magiabi West, Mangmit, Morgan, because we haven't covered those too much previously. So just curious, any color you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, I believe we put this section out in the release. If not, it's on the website. But we've got a lot of targets, and as a geologist, you have to be able to rank those accordingly. And we've now done that work, and we've ranked our targets based on the historic work done, some of our more recent work where we've been looking at pathfinder analysis and strike lengths and widths, and we've got, these really fantastic targets. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is that there's basically a northern sulfide zone beneath each of these particular vein outcrops. The fact that they historically drilled 4.5 meters at 10 grams a ton and walked away from it, saying that wasn't good enough, is a sign of the time back then. But, I'd be happy to go and replicate that. We've done some, additional structural interpretation. We believe they may have even drilled in the wrong direction, which is funnily enough how they discovered Sinavit. They actually drilled it wrong, and 3 years later came back and drilled it the correct way and found it. So, we believe some of the historic drill holes underrepresent the mineralization there. As we've already shown, as a team, we can make discoveries by getting out in the bush, with rock chips going over 100 gram per ton and 4% copper out of the Magiardi vein. That'll be the first time that's ever seen a drill hole. So, we've just got 5 or 6 targets in this main zone, and then all the areas between. The only reason, that we're not going to, say, Lulai Hill is that at the moment it sits beneath cover. right? So we know there's a vein there, but it's beneath clay cover and or recent volcanic ash cover. So, we don't want to go pattern drilling the entire 4 kilometers because we'll soon run out of money. So using the science, using what we can see to be able to be predictive and go and drill the holes with the best chance of success. But I believe the entire corridor is going to be mineralized. And so I'm very excited to keep drilling this thing for the rest of the year.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it today. I appreciate you both coming on and give us some color about where things stand there at Wild Dog. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, absolutely. That is Greg McCunn, CEO of Great Pacific Gold, and Callum Spink, Vice President of Exploration at Great Pacific Gold. They trade on the TSX Venture under the symbol GPAC and on the OTCQX with the symbol GPGCF. The information presented should not be considered investment advice. Mining Stock Daily and its affiliates are not responsible for any loss arising from any investment decision in connection with the material presented herein. Please do your own research or speak with a licensed financial representative before making any investment decisions.